So we've heard a little bit today, off and on, about understanding the people that we serve through our design. That includes both the end users or customers. That also includes the internal folks, employees, and other members of an organization who help give rise to that experience or mediate or influence that experience. But what we didn't really hear too many folks dive into in detail is how we gain that understanding on the level that we need to be successful. And I think for a lot of people in this room, there's a lot of experience and expertise. So my hope is that what I'm about to go through as I give you this introduction is actually old hat. If everybody in this room nods along and is like, yep, agree, this is not new, I would be psyched. But I didn't want to assume, none of us wanted to assume that that was the case or that this was table stakes for everybody. So we wanted to give you just a little bit of an introduction to what it is we're going to talk about. And really what that boils down to is behavior-based design. We've heard a lot about psychology, behavioral motivation today. We heard about the difference between understanding people's motivations versus just their demographics. But we have done a lot of work at MadPow to understand how that works. And we've learned a lot of lessons, some the hard way, honestly, and we'd love to share that. So this session is going to be how to actually put some of that knowledge about behavior-based design into play, into action, not just to talk about how important it is, because I think we all agree on that. So let me give you a little bit of background, if this will work. Yeah. Am I pointing at you?
Pressing the laser.
I am. No, it's, ow, sorry. Might be just because my finger was over. Is it good? Okay, we're okay. Give you a little bit of background about what informs this work. So those of you who are familiar with MadPow know that we work in a couple different important areas. That includes experience innovation, behavior change, digital solutions. But all of that work ultimately teaches us about what makes people tick and how to make their lives better. And I say this briefly just to give you the idea that there's a lot of context behind what we're going to work through together. We've done quite a lot of work with a lot of different folks in a lot of different parts of the financial services world. So what you're going to get to learn out of this session is actually built on thousands and thousands of hours of research, and you kind of get like a shortcut or a fast track to having all that knowledge without having to do all those thousands of dollars of research. So we also have done quite a lot of work with personas, and that's what this is going to get into in more detail, but this is where I want to give you that table stakes definition. So personas, you've got something in your mind when you hear the word persona, right? I hope. Hopefully everybody in this room's done some work with personas, but that could be very different among all of you. What I'm going to suggest is that by the end of this session, you might walk out of this room with a radically different notion of what personas can do for you, or you might say, oh, I knew all that all along. I kind of had a sense. I just now have a better idea of how to make it work. I can take this back to my team tomorrow, hopefully. Well, not tomorrow, Monday. So let's talk about personas, though, because again, this word probably means everything different to everybody in this room. When we think about personas, I hear a lot of people kind of think about just the general definition of the term. This is just one definition of a persona. It's the kind of the mask that somebody wears or the way of being in the world. But this is a little bit problematic because you start to think down that road of persona and it gets to people wearing a mask, not being real. It doesn't point at the real understanding of what makes someone tick. So instead of that, I want to talk about a definition of persona that's based more on how they represent key portions of an audience. And these are kind of the main things that we think personas do. I'm hoping there's a lot of head nodding, and I don't really need to go through a lot of this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page when we talk about personas and how they serve our work, these are the things they're aiming to do. To promote a uniform understanding of our audience, to make sure we're all on the same page about who we're talking about, to make sure that we see them as humans with empathy. I think in the early days of persona development, that was kind of all they did, but that was important because nobody was doing it. We needed to see these people as humans and have empathy for them rather than just seeing them as a nameless, faceless role with feature needs. And so there are a lot of things that personas are meant to do beyond just describe a character of a human, but one of the nice quotes that I like to use when I talk about the value of personas is how they help you understand someone's needs from the place of a human and the motivational behaviors that are going on, not just, hey, this person is in this role or is this type of investor or is of this demographic. And this quote from Alan Cooper, one of the first early writers of personas back in the 90s, described the way that persona development helped the work that he was doing, I think still resonates today. I found that this play acting technique, and he's describing using personas to put himself in the mindset of the people he was designing for, is remarkably effective for cutting through complex design decisions and questions of functionality and interaction, allowing me to clearly see what was necessary and unnecessary, and more importantly, to differentiate between what was used frequently and what was needed infrequently, What I want to focus on here is that he was using a persona or personas to make design decisions. And I think sometimes that gets lost today when we talk about personas, because everybody's doing it. Every team has personas or has at some point built personas, but I still hear a lot of people say, yeah, we made personas. They're over there. They're on the wall. They're in the design studio. That's it. How many of you are using personas actively, and how many of you have personas that you feel are relevant today and not just for the 3 months after they were developed, right? So it's the key part here that they can drive decisions and design work, and that's what we're going to talk about today, because I could stand up here and talk to you about it, but you getting to try some hands-on work will see how this can actually function, and that's our goal. When I talk about persona development, this can take a lot of different forms. We've done a lot of different types of personas at MadPow, and I'm sure all of your teams and organizations have done all kinds of work that looked interesting and different from this. We can take a persona and build it out and add details, and we can even tell ourselves what the type of journey that persona needs to go through, and what the key touch points are, and what the behavioral archetypes are for that particular person. And so there's a lot of things you can put into a persona that tell us about who that person is and what they need. And they also can serve a million different forms. If you Google personas at this point, everybody's got something different. So this is less about telling you about the right way to build and use personas, but more about how to make them actionable, how to make the personas you already use in your organization more actionable. To do that, let's talk about why they fail really briefly. These are some of the most common reasons that personas fail, or that people say, yeah, we did that once, we're not doing it again, it was a waste of time. First couple bullets on this list are the ones we're going to focus on today. They can be time and resource intensive, because if you have to do a lot of research to understand and build a persona, that costs time and money. But if you do it right, they can be useful time and time again, and you won't have to redo it because you'll have something that's valuable with lasting value. They're often based on demographics, which I'll talk through in a little more detail in a minute. Sometimes they're not based on research. Sometimes they promote stereotypes, and so on. So those are the things that we want to talk about today specifically that we can work on. And I wanted to focus briefly on demographic personas and why they're not good. So I'm just going to cut to the chase. They're not good. They don't tell us what users need. They don't tell us how people are going to react to the products and services that we're building for them. And they don't tell us why people are going to actually do what they do. And you guys have heard all the millions of examples out there, studies over the ages, when people say that they prefer one thing and then do literally the opposite. Say that they intend to do one thing, like change bank accounts, Mike Kirkpatrick, and then not, right? So there's always a difference between what people will tell us or what we think they will do, especially based on their demographic, and then their actual behavior. So we don't want to just look at demographics. I also want to make a point here about the tendency for personas to become stereotypes. So what comes to mind when you think about a blonde woman in her early 40s with kids? Just get a mental image in your head, okay? Blonde woman, early 40s, has kids. Is it this? Is this what you saw? Something kind of like this? Maybe something approximating that? How about this? Blonde woman, early 40s, has a kid. How about this? Blonde woman, early 40s, has a kid. Right? So personas can sometimes be mistaken for stereotypes. They can promote stereotypes if you're doing it on demographics alone. This is why demographic-based personas don't help very much, because the difference between somebody based on their market segment and demographic is not going to tell you anything about their day-to-day needs, their motivations, their goals, etc. So the other thing that stereotypes are bad for, which aside from the fact that we know that stereotypes are bad in general, is that they also don't explain some of the things we see in markets and in value proposition design that don't make a lot of sense. There are certain stereotypes that have plenty of trends being broken in those stereotypes. So for example, there's a stereotype that most gamers are men, but there is actually quite a lot of documented evidence that lots of women play games. And there are actually a number of women segments that dominate certain portions of the gaming industry. Those particular people are breaking that stereotype, and if we just base our personas on demographics, we're going to lose out on understanding what makes them tick and how to reach them. Similarly, high-end or luxury goods, there's this notion that they're only bought by high net worth individuals, and we know that's not true. What about the group of people that are low or middle income and who spend their money on those luxury goods? Baby boomers don't like technology, right? Of course not. We know now increasing numbers of baby boomers who are increasingly tech savvy, who want digital first, etc. And millennials, aside from my avocado toast joke earlier, the other one we hear so much is that they want to do everything online. They don't want to talk to people. And yet there are plenty of folks that are responding to direct mail, cutting coupons, want to have a high-touch human experience. So a demographic persona is not going to help me understand how to reach those people. So what do we do to solve that? We base our personas on behavior, not demographics. And when we say behavior-based, this is what I mean. We believe that understanding people's behavior is critical because it allows design teams to envision how a person or persona will react into the wide range of scenarios that we're designing for. So it's all about what they will do, not just what they will say they will do or what we think they will do on paper. They help us understand and then create designs that build on that knowledge. When we talk about behavior, we usually break it down into attributes. We come up with traits and archetypes that explain what someone's behavior is likely to be doing in response to different triggers or scenarios. And I want to give you an example. So this may or may not be somebody that is going to be on stage shortly. Say there's a 30-year-old woman, married, no children, works in a design company, lives in Boston, is an expat. Her demographic-based persona would just list you those items, right? But the behavior-based persona for someone like this would be looking at entirely different types of information. For example, maybe she's overwhelmed by complexity, maybe she wants to be told what to do and doesn't like to have to make a lot of those decisions, doesn't research her options very well, usually chooses the easiest thing, doesn't really follow a budget very well, though is okay financially. She's doing okay even though she doesn't follow a budget. That's your behavior-based persona compared to woman in her 30s living in Boston. And what's the point of that? What's the value of that? We'll take that info on the right and tell me what we can get out of the design. There we go. The design decisions we have to make around that. So that behavior-based persona that tells me that she feels overwhelmed, what she needs for less complexity and choice, we can make design decisions such as giving her simple step-by-step directions so she knows what to do. Educate her about her options and explain the benefits of each one in a way that allows her to make that decision and not spend too much time. Provide support that she needs to meet her savings goals and stick to her budget, right? So it's not about just understanding her age, but what her behavioral challenges are and overcoming those barriers. So with all of that in mind, what I'm going to do is introduce two of my colleagues, and they're going to take you through a little bit of an introduction and then some exercises to actually help you guys walk out of this room with an understanding of how to put that at play in your organization. Sound good? Yeah? Okay. So welcome on up Priyama Barua. She is an experienced strategy director at MadPow. And Dana Ortegón, she is a senior content strategist at MadPow. They are the brilliant minds, among a few others, who put together a tool that we call Impact, and they're going to talk you through it.
Oh, hi. So if you were here last year or if you were wandering around in the exhibitor area, you may have seen a table with Impact. And Impact is a persona creation tool that's for anyone who wants to use an understanding of human behavior and the power of play to create better experiences for people. It looks like a board game, but it actually is a very powerful tool that lets teams move from user research to actual concrete design principles, basically in one session.
Right, so there's many ways that you can inform a behavior-based persona. What we're going to do today is going to be one of those ways, but let me tell you about some other ways you can inform a behavior-based persona. I was staring at this trying to figure out how to go next. I think
arrow.
The green one, the big button. Right, so you can use anecdotal evidence. There is a lot of wisdom and data that lives within your company and the people that work for your company. There is also the possibility of doing primary research, which you should be doing. And if not, that none of those are possible, you can also collect data from secondary research to inform a behavior-based persona. So if you were to use anecdotal data, there may be people in your organizations that interact with your customers on a day-to-day basis. They might be tellers, financial advisors, call center representatives. They have a wealth of information. We've seen that firsthand. Or even researchers that have had past experience with understanding how people approach their personal finances. Of course, don't confuse one-off stories with anecdotal evidence, and be careful who you go to for that information. So by speaking to those experts within your company, you can collect that information on how people are behaving. You can use secondary data. So this is an example of when we ran a workshop in Iceland where we couldn't do primary research, but had this beautiful 3 set of financial research that mapped up with what we were thinking about behavior attributes. That's something you're going to learn about today. And we had participants use this data, this survey data, to inform behavioral insights on their customers. So that's something else you can do. Thirdly, you can collect primary research data in a variety of ways, whether that's ethnographic research, even user interviews, surveys, focus groups, usability testing in lab and see what people are doing, experiential audits by observing people in the very atmosphere in which they're interacting with the financial company. But today we're going to use user interviews as a way to help you understand how we go from research, primary research, which is a user interview, to behavioral insights, and then how we apply it to design. So we're going to do those 3 things today. So I'll call Dana on to introduce what exactly we mean by behavior attributes and which of those you need to know for today.
Right, so Jen talked about behavior attributes, but just to give you a quick refresh, they're really just personality traits. So if you play Dungeons and Dragons, you know that you spec out your character with certain traits and powers and things, and that's somewhat of what a behavior attribute is. They're actually super important because they can give us a lot of clues to how people might respond, react, or behave in a certain situation or with your products and services. So we display these attributes on a scale. They're extreme at either end. So in this case, the example that we're giving is impressionability, and that's how easily someone is influenced. You have someone who can hear 10 negative opinions, still take in that information and decide to feel positive about something. And on the other end, you have someone who hears 1 bad Yelp review and decides never to go to that restaurant again. So today, since the activity that we're going to be doing is teaching you or letting you practice listening to user interviews and mining them for clues about your audience's behavior, I'm just going to take you through a subset of the attributes. Again, in Impact, we'd use a wide, like maybe 16 or 17 attributes. We're not going to use them all today, but I will start here. And we have them grouped together by ones that are similar to each other. So execution is around how do people do things? What types of actions do they take? How do they like to interact with products and services? And we start with service preference. So that's pretty self-explanatory. You have someone who wants to self-serve. You have the person who really wants another human being on the other end. And some of our scales have a middle point. And in this case, there is one for the person who has no preference. The second attribute is tech savviness. So again, self-explanatory, someone who's very tech savvy, someone who's not so much. We have a second cluster or grouping, guidance, and in this case there's self-direction, another one that has this midpoint. So you have the soloist, I can do anything on my own, I don't need anyone holding my hand. You have the delegator, which is, I just want someone to do it for me. And then right there in the middle is the validator, who they want to take in some information, they want to have a little bit of control and choice, but they want to make sure that an expert sees what they do before they make that actual decision. You saw impressionability, so I'm not going to belabor that. We get now to our final grouping, which is management. So this is on a day-to-day basis or on a decade-to-decade basis. How does someone manage their personal finances? We have here attention to detail. So the deep dive person, they've got their spreadsheet. They want to know everything. They're interested in interest rates. And then there's the surface level person. Have I overdrawn my bank account? Next, there's fiscal responsibility, strict, never misses a payment, always sticks to a budget. And then there's lax. They're comfortable paying a few service charges for the sake of not having to constantly be on top of things. And then this one is more of a touchy-feely thing. This is satisfaction. How do I feel about my finances in general? Am I happy with them? Do I feel positive? Do I think I'm moving in the right direction? Or do I feel really negative and worried and wondering what's going to happen? And then we have approach. This is a little bit similar to the lax or the surface level and deep dive. The micromanager is checking a balance every single day. They're watching their 401k. They really want to keep on top of things. And the hands-off person is really fine looking at that annual statement and seeing where they stand. So now we're going to move to the next part, which is your actual activity, where we're going to conduct some mock interviews.
Yeah.
I will be leading them.
So I hope you were paying attention, because the knowledge that you gained in the past 10 minutes are going to come into use right now. So you would have seen that we gave out these sheets of paper on each table. Just make sure everyone has one. In case you don't, just raise your hand. All right, so now, as Dana said, we're going to do a mock interview. What this really means is that we've carefully crafted what we are actually going to say, but think about this in real life if you're doing interviews and how you take what people say and apply them to the design decisions that you would be making. So keep a lookout for what people are saying, like those quotes that you see on the screen there. Take notes, as well as mark with a pen where the people you think would fall on the different ends of the spectrum here. So if I answer something that you think makes me sound like I would rather speak to a human being to do something, just make a big X where the human service is. Similarly, so you're going to do one side for one persona, that's me, and the other side for the other persona, that's Nedret. So please welcome Nedret Sahin. Right, the scenario here is that you're designing an app, a budgeting app for young women, to help guide them in financial decisions and make sure that they have the education and guidance to make the right decisions. So what's going on here is that we're trying to gain the perspective of two millennial women. But be careful, what makes them unique? What makes them both unique? Is it their demographics or is it how they behave, right?
I'll start with Nedret. Hi, Nedret. My name is Dana, and I'm a user researcher for a design company. And today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about how you manage your personal finances on a daily basis. So things like budgeting and how you decide what to spend. I know that money can be a really personal thing for most people, so if you feel uncomfortable about answering anything, you can always say, I prefer not to answer. But okay, let's just do this. So first of all, do you actually have a budget?
I do, actually, yes.
And so have you always used a budget?
No, I started when I graduated from college.
And at that point, what made you decide that you needed one?
Well, when I was in school, I was still kind of dependent on my family, but when I graduated, everything kind of changed. You know, I had student loans, I needed to figure out how I was gonna have to pay those off. It affected everything, where I was gonna live, how much I could afford to pay for rent, and what kind of job I looked for.
So could you kind of walk me through, when you decided that you needed to have a budget, how did you, what was your first step? How did you create one?
Well, I first Googled how to make a budget, literally just that. And I found a bunch of apps that looked really good. I checked the reviews on the App Store because I was really curious, and then I asked my company's Slack channel just to see if anyone had actually used any of these apps before.
And tell me what made you choose the one that you finally ended up using?
Well, they had a lot of online tutorials, and there was a section for FAQs, and even a person you could call or email if you had questions. It took me about an hour to get everything linked up, but my checking account and my savings account and all that stuff. But from then on, it was great. I always know how much I have to spend.
So knowing that, how was that helpful for you with managing your finances?
Well, it helps me be less impulsive. Before, when I would go out with my friends, we would just run a tab at the bar, and at the end of the night, we would close a tab, and it might be like $60. But now, before I go out, I know that 30 is my max, and that's how much I have to spend. So I feel a lot more comfortable with my finances. I guess I'm a little bit of a nerd about this stuff. I like knowing where my money is going. I like watching my debt go down, even if it's really little by little. And even though I don't have a lot to save, I'm slowly building my emergency fund. And it's kind of like going to the gym. If I stick to my plan, I end up getting the things I want. I won't be in debt if I keep that up. I don't want to be one of those people that's always worried about money, you know.
So it sounds like you are thinking a little bit in terms of the future. Does that extend to thinking about investing at all?
I like the sound of investing. I just don't feel like I have enough money right now. I mean, the closest I get to that right now is choosing what 401k, choosing funds for my 401k essentially. And my company's plan offers a lot of choices, which is nice. I compared them all and I went with the no-load ones. Those were the ones that they charge you the least amount of money to manage your account.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Your input has been really helpful. I know it's going to help us design something good, so
Thanks.
thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Priyama, yes, you know that I'm a researcher and I'm doing some interviews to find out more about how young women manage their personal finances. So I'm going to be asking you some questions about that today. As I said to Nedret, it can be personal, so decline any question that feels like it's over the line. So we'll start with the same thing. Do you have a budget?
No.
No. Have you ever had one?
No.
So tell me a little bit, how do you feel about budgets? What do you think about budgets?
So growing up, my parents always had a budget, and they used that as an excuse to not let me buy stuff. We never went for vacation. No cool clothes. And now I feel like some of my friends are the same way. They can't go out, and they're always like, oh, let's just have an appetizer or pregame at my house so we don't spend too much money. So I just don't like budgets.
All right, so you don't have a budget. So tell me a little bit about your interactions with money on a daily basis. Walk me through a typical day.
Well, I go to work in the morning. When I get out of the tea, there's a coffee shop there that I really like. So I get coffee, and with tip, it's about $5. I buy my lunch every day. I guess around $12, sort of, every day. I'm not sure. I know I could save a lot of money if I brought my lunch from home, but then I work in downtown, and there's so many great lunch options. So I just want to try something new every day. I don't think I spend on anything else during the week. I just get Lyfts or Uber or dry cleaning from time to time. But those are essentials, you know. Those are not stuff that I have a choice about. I go out with friends on the weekends and do brunch sometimes. Go out for dinner, drinks on Friday and Saturday.
So when you mentioned before about running a tab or whatever, when you go out with these friends, how do you guys settle the tab?
At the end of the day, someone will just tell me what I owe them and I'll Venmo them. That's it.
So you also had a kind of a list of things. You have lunch out, you have coffee, Ubers, dry cleaning. What other types of monthly expenses do you have?
Student loans, of course. I'm going to be paying those till I retire. My rent, then my T-Pass, and my gym membership. I go to a very nice gym.
So it was pretty easy for you to tell me what you spend. Do you track your spending?
Not really. I probably should. I got hit with a bunch of fees last year when I didn't deposit my paycheck on time. So my rent check bounced, and a bunch of other ones too. So my parents had to co-sign my lease. My credit score dropped really low. That was kind of humiliating. I mean, I went to college and I have a good job, but there's no excuse for that. I mean, when I have all these student debt, what's a small little expense? You know, what's the point of being careful of small expenses when I have this huge expense to pay off? Even if I ate rice and beans every day, I wouldn't be able to pay it off.
Okay, so that's your outlook on the future. And you mentioned that you have a job, and you have a good job. Does your employer have any type of 401k or FSA, anything?
When I joined, they did this seminar. This was my first job out of college. So they had this person come in, talk to you about it. I didn't really know much about it, but I like that they had a human being come in and tell me, instead of having to read everything on a piece of paper. And then they tell you where to invest your money, what's the right way to do that. I don't have to think about all of that. Maybe at some point I'll want to learn more, but for now I'd rather just let the experts make the decisions for me.
So what would it take, what kind of app, what would it have to have? How could we entice you to use a budgeting app?
Well, they have to make it seem less boring, like a good thing, and not a punishment, not have to restrict your payments or expenses all the time. I mean, everyone tells me I should have a budget, my friends, my parents, my coworkers. But like I said, my experience growing up wasn't great with budgets. And nothing I've seen so far has changed my mind.
Okay. Well, thank you for your honesty. I'm sure it's going to help us create something that's good for people who feel the same way about budgets as you do.
Absolutely. That's yours.
Did she sell it? All right. You got to let loose. You're right. The usability of this is pretty terrible. Yeah. So next what we're going to do is an activity where you're going to have a team. Your table is your team. So what you're going to do for the next 10 minutes is compare attribute sheets and discuss the differences and similarities between what you've all filled out. As a team, you're then going to create a single attribute sheet for your designated persona, and this will kind of be your source of truth. So if you have any problems, flag one of us down. We'll be around to help.
Split the rooms into personas.
Okay, so what we're going to do here is actually split the room so that not everyone is working on each persona, right? So this side forward, do you want Priyama or do you want me? I know I really put you on the spot there. Which one would be more fun? You want me? Okay, we'll do that because that makes sense. Priyama, you guys get Priyama on this side. So for the next 10 minutes, try and come up with one single sheet that's going to be a source of truth for you.
So what we're going to do now is share a little bit, and I will give you the benefit of the 1 to 2 minutes I'm going to continue talking before I am then going to put someone on the spot. So if you're thinking you might want to volunteer, think through that right now. I am going to look for at least one group from each side of the room, because what I'd love for you to share, I mean, if you really just want to read the high-level bullets that are on the worksheet that you filled out, I want to do this for 2 reasons. One, just so you can get a chance to hear what other people who had the same persona as you interpreted and saw in that app design as the pluses and minuses, some of the gaps or things you'd want to change, but also to compare to the other persona. Because there are probably aspects of this design that'll work well for both. Some aspects may not work for either. And there might be things that are going to be very key and different, but you might be able to hear some opportunities where the design could be adjusted in a way that more specifically meets the needs of each of them individually in the same design. Again, that's a lot to ask in a very short exercise, but listen for those things as we share out, because all of this is in the spirit of sharing with you some of these types of exercise tips, thinking that can hopefully inform what happens outside these walls after today. So I've given you ample time to work up the nerve. Does anybody from either side want to volunteer to read out their table's work? Because if not, I'm going to just random pick somebody. There's a lot of blaming going on over here. We have one right here? Thank you for going first.
Okay, we had the Priyama persona, and we felt that what worked well for this persona was that there were small actionable things, like actions that she could take to improve her situation, and that it did offer some positive feedback. It indicated that her credit score had gone up 3 points. So she seemed generally kind of dissatisfied with her financial situation. She talked a lot about how, I'm never going to get out of this student debt, so why even bother, basically. So we thought those, encouraging points and calls to action, or, just congratulations, you did a great thing, would be helpful. What didn't work for this persona was that, she's really not into the details. She doesn't really care, and there was just a lot of information on here. She's more interested in the outcome. It didn't really show how any small actions would add up over time to help improve that, kind of overwhelming burden of student debt that she had. She also preferred to, or mentioned in the interview that she liked to speak with a human being and appreciated that. There's no phone number indicated anywhere on here, so there wasn't really a way for her to reach out. Let's see, what would you do differently on this screen? We would want to have the interface show how what she's doing is reducing the student loans, encouraging her, and like helping that make that less overwhelming and intimidating for her. Perhaps give her some calls to action, or maybe not a call to action exactly, but like, hey, FYI, if you put an extra $50 a month toward that student loan, you'd pay it off 3 years sooner than you expected, or something like that. Showing her project progress, and showing a visual of that savings goal, that Palm Springs savings goal, to try to keep her in line. We know she likes to have a lot of fun. So the features and functionality that we would add would be maybe a social feature where she could share some progress or share some of her like small incremental successes. Show the difference between, on the budget side, showing a difference between things that are fixed expenses and things that are not fixed expenses that she might have some more control over. 'Cause she also talked a lot about, she seemed to want a lot of control, and she just want to kind of go like, I feel like taking an Uber, so I'm going to take an Uber. I want that level of control. But ultimately, we didn't want it to be too detailed. Yeah, I think that's about it.
That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. So I want to call out just a couple things that I heard there that are important to what we're discussing right now, and that is the rationale for some of those points. You mentioned at one point, because you identified her on the one scale around, how much of a human touch she desires versus digital, and she did describe the human touch as being important, and there is missing from that any way to reach out to a human, and you don't have to plaster it right at the top, but to make it easy for someone like Priyama to find in the situation where she does want to have some interaction with the brand or the app or the organization that isn't just the app. There was something else around control, and there's the key want for less complex, letting the people that are kind of experts take care of the expert stuff, but breaking it down into the small incremental things that make sense to me. So those were very much driven by the behavioral archetype that emerged from that interview. So that was great, thank you. Star student. Anybody on this side? No pressure, since they did such a good job, you have to do a good job too, but anybody from the Nedret side want to share their worksheet? If not, I'm going to just pick one, so. Oh boy, everybody's looking away. You guys are such typical students. How about this table right here? I pick on you because there's a big group. There's safety in numbers. So who's going to volunteer to share? Be brave. Be brave. Do it. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. So for Nedret, we had some similar features to that side, which is kind of interesting, but from the perspective of her really wanting to dig into the details sometimes. And so it could even be something like on the savings goals page, having coupons or deals or some more information about working towards her goal and opportunities to save money towards that if she wanted to dig into that. And then on the front page, or the first page for the budget balance, we were talking about the UI a little bit and the way that the categories are broken down. If she wanted to dig into those deeper, how could that be a little clearer? And then also with the overview page, so getting into this month and this week, anticipating her wanting to click into those more and see different categories. Let's see.
That's good.
We had, just some other ideas, like what changed between last month and this month, and some tips and other things, just since she is very involved and independent in doing her own research, and wanting to kind of validate things and have some more of that control.
Yeah, that's
I don't know if
great.
the table has any other comments too to add.
Anything you guys want to add? Okay, great, thank you. This is great too. There's always a little bit of a risk because we never know, how much people are going to take away from the exercise and what you'll be able to articulate. But I am really pleased because even in this short little mini exercise, it sounds like you guys are able to connect the dots between, again, listening for the behavioral archetype and being able to tie some very specific design rationale to it. And that's really what we're trying to get across here, is that building behavioral psychology into the development of personas and understanding your customers doesn't have to necessarily be this huge, scary, complex thing. Sometimes it really does just boil down to, if we understand what makes somebody tick, we can figure out how to make very concrete tactical design decisions to better serve their needs without having to blow up our entire system. I mean, sometimes blowing up the entire system is the right thing to do, but this is going to help, I hope, for many of you connect the dots. And part of why we like to share this process and this tool, and we'll give you some more info if you'd like it, is because we've, again, had to go through it ourselves over thousands and thousands of hours of work, and we've realized that patterns emerge and personas aren't really that useful if they're stuck in time. And so the ability to do what you saw here today on stage, you can do that actually pretty quickly and iteratively and in a very agile way, and you can generate sets of personas in a very fast, lightweight, agile manner that are useful for a short period of time, for a specific need, for a specific product task. And then when you're done making those decisions for that piece of the product or that part of the service, you can get rid of those personas, throw them away, do the process again, quick, lightweight, more than 2 people ideally. But the idea is to take that same mentality and apply it in a very agile way rather than make the persona development thing become such an arduous process. So I also wanted to, A, open it up to questions, but also B, prompt you, especially the bottom 2 here. I'd love if anybody here has anything to share, and we do have 2 mics hanging out around somewhere. Can you envision yourself using this in your practice or your organization? And if not, or if partial, what would you feel that you would need to be better empowered to do so? If there are answers to that floating in your head, I'd love to hear about that. Or if you have general questions, now we'll take them. And I'm going to invite the rest of the team back up here too, because we can chat a little bit. Questions, comments to that end, or anything else? Anybody wants to raise their hand? There's one over there. I don't know where the mics ended up.
Hi, I'm a student still, so I'm from a student's perspective. I think that this would be a great exercise within the educational system in teaching personas and what exactly they do and the outcome of them. So I definitely encourage this within schools. So definitely reaching out through those platforms as well.
That's great, thank you. I don't know if anybody, by the way, I'm going to kind of look to the team so that if anybody wants to weigh in on that. I appreciate that. That's something we've heard a bit, and I think there's a lot of interest there. So figuring out how to find more of those opportunities is something we'd be very interested in hearing about and looking for. So, and there's I don't know if Priyama, you want to wait to talk in a bit about if folks want to learn more about this, want to get access to, there's a free kind of light version of the full kit that can accompany this whole process. We can share that, especially for students and folks that are at nonprofits, and we're very happy to help in that way. So we'll get you more info in a minute, but let's continue with questions. I saw another hand. There's one here too in a minute. Yeah.
Something that, I think my microphone's broken. There we go. So something we try and do during usability lab sessions is we actually invite business partners, developers to kind of see the sessions firsthand. Mm-hmm. Have you ever tried this with, say, non-UX folks to see how they would actually mark off individual participants in a usability session as a great decision-making tool?
Yes, and I'm going to actually toss it to these guys in a minute, so you have 20 seconds to think about your answer, because I know there's lots of things swirling. That's a very good, the key value of this process, actually. It's one of the main reasons we advocate for when you are actually going to use something like the impact kit/methodology, which is really it's not a kit. We say that, as shorthand. It's a methodology, it's a process, it's a way of working, and we highly recommend that you're doing exactly that, bringing stakeholders in from multiple parts of the organization, partly so that they can see and hear and build empathy, partly so that their understanding of how understanding the customer informs their work and everything comes together. So it's all a very important part of that process. Today, a lot of people in the room here already understand this, so it's kind of preaching to the choir, but that's a big part of it. Anything to add?
No, I think you said it.
Fine, I'm not going to answer the next one at all.
Okay, fine.
There was another one.
There we go. Yeah. So I come from the asset management world, and so we get so little time with the chief investment officers, the traders, the asset managers. I see this as a really nimble way to get in for that quick and dirty session almost with them, that you could do it in this really agile, nimble way to get that feedback that we very seldom ever get. It's because we can't get 10, 15 minutes on the calendar, and if we do, it has to be so structured in the whole bit. But I see this as being a really neat tactical way to get at that and get that quick hit from them to do the litmus test on a piece of functionality that we're looking at implementing that's going to really impact their world.
Ooh, impact their world. You didn't even try to do that, but that was a pun. I completely agree. I don't know if there's a question there, but
No, it's a
just a
statement.
comment, overall
Yeah.
statement. I completely agree. I think oftentimes folks that high up are least connected to the end user, right? And they're looking for the tidbits, the high-level information that they can pass around to help make decisions. And you probably won't get those folks sitting in front of this kit and using it in the way that it's intended to be used. But there are parts of it, like you said, that you can use to help have the conversation. If they're not going to come in and watch the session, maybe you can say, well, we watched it, or we filmed a bit of it for you. Here, watch this 30-second bit about how someone reacted to this piece of functionality that you were so tied to, that you loved. Look, it's failing. I didn't say that, they said it. They're our customer. So there's a lot that you can do in just kind of using the customer's voice and bringing it into the conversation.
And sometimes they are the customer. So we're actually designing for those people, or our products or services are intended for those people.
Yeah.
But they're so, they have so little time, it's so hard to get on their calendar.
Yeah.
I want to add to that it also is a useful framework for creating research insights, because if you can tie these back to not only the verbatim quotes, but the attributes that they might speak to, when you start talking about behavioral science, people's ears really stand up. So.
Yeah, good.
All right.
Want to hit the next last little wrap up?
So when we do this exercise with people, something they often ask us is, now what? Now that we have 2 personas or 3 personas for this product, how do we use it? How do we design for everyone? So the first thing you can do is you don't have to design for everyone. This is where your qualitative and quantitative research come together. If you have recognized that there are different kind of personality traits, and your quantitative data shows that 70% of my audience is like Nedret, then you design for Nedret, because that makes business sense. Secondly, this is the age of personalized adaptive content. So there is no reason why in the future you shouldn't be thinking about how you can design for both of us, cater to not just our demographic needs, but also our behavioral needs. And thirdly, a lot of people are using understanding of behavior to create business success by differentiating themselves from their customers. A really good example of this is credit card companies. So you'll see that there are these whole range of credit cards that require you to log into a website every month or every day and sign up for a new bonus or keep a track of what's happening with your money and really be hands-on. Versus there's this whole other set of products which is 2% cash back. That's it. That's all you need to know. That's all you need to worry about, and you don't need to touch that. That is how behavior has been used in product design, and that's how you can use this understanding of people to set your product completely apart. So we're just at 3, so we can end up. If you want to chat more, please come by. We have a booth there. You'd have seen we put little cards out on the table. Those have links to a website that can give you more information. If you don't want to type a website link into your phone, there's a QR code in the worksheets that we handed out. So you're welcome to use that as well. But feel free to ask any of us any questions related to this. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all for your participation.